I'm 82 years old, and I'm finally saying this without trying to sound noble about it. My children didn't drift away in one big fight. They drifted away the way paint fades, quietly, while I kept telling myself everything was fine. I'm not recording this to be understood. I'm doing it because there's not much time left to tell the truth without dressing it up. It's morning here. The house is still, the kind of still that has weight. I make my breakfast the same way every day because there's no one else to consider. Toast, a little fruit, coffee that's gone lukewarm by the time I remember it. There are photos on the wall. You'd think we were close, looking at those photos. A birthday cake with crooked candles. A school picture where my son's smile looks forced because he hated the photographer. My daughter in a cap and gown, hair tucked behind her ears, holding flowers. A photograph can lie without meaning to. It can take one decent afternoon and let it pretend it was the whole story. If you asked me years ago why my kids didn't call much, I'd have said the usual things. They're busy. They've got their own families. Life moves fast. And that's true, partly. But it's not the real reason. The real reason is that I spent most of their childhood teaching them I was the kind of man you couldn't reach unless it was urgent. And then I got old and acted shocked when they didn't reach for me. When I was young, I didn't think of it that way. I thought I was doing what a man was supposed to do. I got married in my early 20s. We didn't have money. We had a small apartment that always smelled like somebody else's dinner coming through the walls. Our couch had springs you could feel through the fabric. My wife was the kind of person who made a home out of what we had. She hummed while she did laundry, like the sound could hold everything together. I still hear that humming in my head sometimes, like a radio station you can't quite tune out. Our first child came, and then the second not long after. When people say those early years are a blur, they aren't lying. You're tired, you're broke, you're scared, and you're in love all at once. I remember holding my daughter as a baby and thinking very clearly, I cannot fail her. And that thought didn't feel like love. It felt like pressure. I had a job that didn't pay enough. So I took a better one, then another. The pattern was simple. More money, more responsibility, less of me at home. At first it felt temporary. That's what I told myself anyway. Just until we're stable. Just until we can buy a house. Just until the kids are a little older. Just this busy season. Those words sound reasonable when you're in the middle of life. They sound like planning. I didn't see that I was always postponing being a father in the way my children needed. I was always pushing it into the future like it was a project I could finish later. When the kids were small, they didn't hold grudges. Small children don't. They just want you. They run to the door when they hear your keys. They tug your sleeve. They talk over each other because they've been saving things up to tell you. I'd come home tired, already thinking about the next day, and they'd be there, full of life. And I'd do what I thought a good father did. I'd ask, "How was school?" I'd listen while untying my shoes. I'd nod. But my mind would still be at work. Not because I didn't care, because I believed work was the price of keeping everything safe. My wife would keep dinner warm for me. Sometimes the kids would already be in pajamas, faces washed, teeth brushed, ready for bed. And I'd miss the whole evening without calling it missing. I'd call it providing. My wife tried to talk to me about it, not with yelling, not with threats, just little sentences that landed, and I pretended they didn't. "You missed him again. She asked for you." They were looking out the window. I'd get defensive. I'd say, "I'm doing this for them." I said it like a shield. I meant it too. I wasn't trying to be absent. I was trying to be useful. But being useful is not the same as being there. There's a kind of pride that comes with being needed financially. It makes you feel like the pillar. And when you feel like the pillar, you convince yourself everything else will arrange itself around you. But the truth is, a family doesn't arrange itself around money. It arranges itself around presence. The kids got older, and something subtle changed. They stopped running to the door. They didn't wait at the window. They began to keep their stories for my wife. They told her things at the kitchen table while I was still at work. They asked her questions. They let her see the parts of them that were uncertain or scared or excited. I got the summary version, the grades, the schedule, the basic facts. I didn't notice the change right away because I was used to receiving life in summary form. That's what work does to you. Meetings, reports, bullet points. I started missing things that weren't official events, not just games and recitals. I missed the way my daughter got quieter when she was sad. I missed the way my son acted tough when he needed comfort. Those are not things you can catch up on later. Those are things you have to witness in real time. I did go to some of my son's little league games. I want to be fair. I can still see the dusty field and the folding chairs and the parents with sunburnt noses and coolers at their feet. I can still smell the cut grass and the cheap hot dogs. But I also remember the games I missed. I remember because you remember absences in old age more clearly than you remember attendance. I'd be at the office under humming fluorescent lights, coffee that tasted burnt, paper stacks that never got smaller. Someone would say, "We need you." And I'd say yes. It seemed harmless. It seemed like adulthood. My daughter had a school play once. I told her I would be there, and I meant it when I said it. But the day ran long. I got stuck in something. I walked into the auditorium late, trying to be quiet, scanning for their row. I saw my wife's face first. She didn't glare. She didn't make a scene. She just looked tired. And my daughter was on stage, and she didn't look at me once. Afterwards, she said, "It's okay." That was worse than anger, because "it's okay" can be a way of closing a door without slamming it. I kept thinking I'd make it up in the big ways. College funds, better vacations, a nicer house. I didn't understand that children don't trade closeness for comfort the way adults think they do. They'll take comfort, sure. But it doesn't replace being seen. There's a moment I replay now, and it's not one people would think is important. It wasn't a holiday or a graduation. It was an ordinary evening. My wife was at the sink. The kids were at the table with homework spread out. The radio was on low. My daughter asked me something about a project. I don't even remember what the project was. I remember my own reaction. I sighed. Just a small sigh. The kind you don't think counts. I said, "Not right now. I've had a long day." She looked at me for 1 second. Not angry, not crying, not dramatic. She just nodded, and she turned back to her paper. That nod was a decision. It was her learning something about me. You don't hear the sound of someone giving up on asking you. It's quiet. It looks like a kid going back to their homework. After that, she asked me less and less, and I didn't connect the dots. My son, as he got older, became a master of acting fine. He'd say, "Nothing," when I asked what was wrong. He'd shrug. He'd disappear into his room. I told myself it was normal teenage behavior. I told myself he'd come back around. People always said kids come back around. I didn't see that maybe he was practicing independence early because he didn't feel like leaning on me was an option. You don't choose independence when you feel safe to depend. Sometimes you choose it because it's the only thing that doesn't disappoint you. My wife carried the real weight of raising them. Not just the chores, the listening, the remembering. She knew their teachers' names, their friends' names, the small preferences that make a child feel known. She knew when they were lying and why. She knew when they needed a little extra tenderness. I thought my job was to keep the lights on. And it was, but it wasn't enough. Years passed like that. Not with one big betrayal, just with a steady pattern of small choices. We still had dinners. We still had Christmas mornings and birthday cakes and family photos. But there was a thinness to it, and I didn't know how to name it then. I thought a family was something you had, like a possession. I didn't understand it was something you maintained, like a relationship you keep choosing. When the kids left home, I felt proud. They were good kids. They did well. They didn't get into trouble. I told myself that meant I had succeeded. I told myself I'd done my job. But after they moved out, I noticed something that I tried not to notice. They didn't call much. When they did, the calls were short. They were polite. They were like business calls. How are you? Good. How's work? Busy. Okay, talk soon. We'd hang up and I'd sit there with the receiver in my hand. Back then it was a receiver. And I'd feel something I didn't have language for. Not anger. Something like grief, but without a funeral. Then came the grandchildren. And I thought, maybe this will fix it. Maybe this is where it turns around. I bought little toys. I tried to act lighthearted. I wanted to be the grandfather who gets tackled at the door. I wanted to be wanted. But grandchildren don't repair what you didn't build with your own children. They just show you, in high definition, what you missed the first time. Visits were scheduled. Time was measured. They'd come for an hour or two. We'd have coffee. We'd do the polite conversation. Then they'd leave because nap time or dinner time or a long drive home. And I couldn't blame them. Their lives were full. But I could feel the difference between being part of someone's life and being an item on their list. I could feel it in the way my daughter glanced at the clock, in the way my son stayed standing sometimes, like he didn't want to settle in too deeply. I made mistakes then too, the mistakes of an older man who feels his influence slipping. I'd say little things. You never call. We never see you. You're always busy. I thought I was expressing love. But what I was really doing was adding guilt to an already strained connection. Guilt does not create warmth. It creates distance with a polite smile. My wife, still alive then, would smooth it over. She'd call the kids and talk to them in a way that made them relax. They told her things, and I would hear about those things later, secondhand, like news from a place I used to live. That's a lonely feeling, being married to the person who still has access to your children's hearts. It isn't jealousy exactly. It's a recognition that you're standing outside a room that used to be yours. The turning point came with illness. Not mine, my wife's. It started small, like these things do. Fatigue, a cough, a loss of appetite. We ignored it for longer than we should have because we were used to pushing through. Then tests, then more tests. then the doctor saying words that made the room feel smaller. I became helpful then. I drove her to appointments. I picked up prescriptions. I learned how to make simple meals that didn't come out half raw. I sat next to her in waiting rooms that smelled like disinfectant and old fear. And I watched the way our children showed up. They called her. They visited. They brought food. They sat with her and talked. They knew how to be with her because she had been with them. I was grateful, of course, but I also felt something bitter in my chest that I hated myself for, because their tenderness toward her proved they were capable of closeness. They just didn't have it with me. One night, after a long day, we sat in the living room, the TV off, the lamps on. My wife looked smaller, like the illness had taken more space than she could spare. She said very softly, "They love you. They just don't know you." I didn't argue. There was nothing to argue with. She wasn't blaming me. She was naming something we both had been living with for decades. My wife died in the spring. The kind of spring where everything outside insists on blooming like it doesn't care what you've lost. At the funeral, people said the usual things. She's at peace. She's not suffering. You were lucky to have her. I was lucky, and I didn't deserve how steady she was. After she was gone, the house turned into a museum. Her mug stayed in the cabinet. Her sweater stayed on the chair for a while because I couldn't move it. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. The kids checked on me, they did, but it changed. Without her, there was no natural reason for them to call and linger. They'd call to make sure I was eating, to make sure I'd been to the doctor, to make sure I hadn't fallen. And that's kind in its way, but it isn't intimacy. It hit me slowly that I had become an obligation, not because they were heartless, because I had never built the kind of relationship that turns into companionship in adulthood. You can't skip the foundation and expect the house to stand later. I didn't build that foundation. I built a career. I built a reputation. I built a way of being busy. And now, at 82, I sit at my own kitchen table and realize those things don't keep you company. One afternoon, my son came by to fix something in the bathroom. He's good with his hands, always has been. He worked quietly, focused, like he learned long ago not to waste time talking if nobody's really listening. When he finished, we stood in the hallway for a moment. I tried. "I want you to know I tried," I said. "I've been thinking about when you were a kid." He looked at me, cautious but not unkind. He said, "Yeah?" I said, "I know I wasn't around the way I should have been." He nodded once, not angry, not forgiving, just acknowledging. Then he said, "You were always working." The way he said it wasn't accusing, it was factual, like saying the sky is blue. And that's when I understood something that hurt more than anger would have. To him, my absence wasn't a single wound. It was the climate of his childhood. You don't argue with weather. You just learn to dress for it. After he left, I sat down and stared at my hands. Old hands. Veins like ropes under the skin. I wanted him to say, "But you did your best." I wanted him to make me feel better about it, but he didn't, and he wasn't supposed to. What can't be fixed now isn't just the missed events. It's the missing closeness. I can apologize, and I have. I can acknowledge it, and I am. But I can't go back and be the man who sat on the bed and listened to the full story. I can't go back and be the man who showed up early, who stayed after, who didn't take every phone call like it was life or death. Sometimes I sit in the living room and listen to the refrigerator turn on, the clock ticking, the small sounds of a house occupied by one person. I used to complain about noise, the kids running, the TV, the chatter. I used to come home and want quiet. And now I have it. I have more quiet than I can stand. I keep my phone charged. That's a habit now. I keep it charged like a small hope I don't want to admit to. When it rings, I answer too fast. Then I try to sound casual, like I wasn't waiting. I don't want them to feel burdened. I don't want them to hear the need in my voice, because I'm the one who taught them not to need me. If you're listening to this and you're younger, I'm not going to preach. I don't know your life. I don't know what you're carrying. I only know what I believed and what it cost. I believed there would be more time. I believed I could catch up later. I believed love stayed put just because you said it was there, like a piece of furniture you own. But love isn't furniture. It's closer to something living. If you don't water it, it doesn't die with a bang. It just dries up slowly, and you don't notice until you reach for it, and there's nothing left to hold. If I could go back, I would ask more questions and wait for real answers. I would stop treating my children's feelings like interruptions. I would sit down at the table and not rush the conversation towards something easy. I would go to the school play even if I was tired. I would go to the game even if work was yelling at me. Not because those things are magical, because they tell a child without words, you matter more than this other thing. I used to think being a good father meant being respected. Now I think it means being known. I'm not angry at my children. They didn't do anything wrong by building lives that don't revolve around me. They did what people are supposed to do when they grow up. If there's anger, it's toward my own old assumptions, the assumption that providing money bought permanent closeness. It didn't. Closeness is not a prize you receive later for doing the hard parts. It's the hard part itself, and I learned that too late. If this meant something to you, you can say so. Not to comfort me, just to speak back so it doesn't feel like I'm talking into an empty room. I don't know how many years I have left. My hands shake more now. My memory slips at the edges. Some mornings I wake up and for a few seconds I forget she's gone. Then I remember, and it's like the day loses its color. I love my children. That never disappeared. But love by itself doesn't always build a bridge back. Sometimes it just sits in you, quiet, with nowhere to go. That's what old age has been for me. Not drama, not tragedy the way people imagine it, just time and consequences. I don't expect my children to suddenly come close now, the way they were when they were little. That version of them is gone. That version of me is gone too. All that's left is whatever honesty I can offer before I'm finished. And this is mine. I thought I was building a life for my family. I didn't realize I was building it without them.